Third through fourth grade, welcome. Last week we talked about fact versus opinion. This week we're going to talk about fact versus fiction. Although sometimes when you hear fiction, the opposite of fiction is often called nonfiction. But that means something that is real or based on true or actual facts. So when you hear fiction, you're going to think of things that are pretend. So on this side, the fact side, nonfiction, you would have history or science or other things that we talk about that are true, the things you're learning in school. But on fiction, you might have, instead of history, you might have the American Girl series. Now, most of you have read things like the American Girl series or other historical fiction. It's about a pretend girl who lived during a real time period, in a real place. But that would still be called fiction because it's pretend. Another form of fiction might be something like a pretend world. For instance, the cartoon Frozen. That is a pretend kingdom, Arendelle. The characters are all pretend. They're all made up. But they look realistic. They look like they were set in a place like Norway in a time period that really did exist. But it is pretend and made up. But then you have authors like Dr. Seuss, who enjoys making everything up. His characters are completely pretend. They don't even resemble anything real. You have who's, and you have giant cats, and you have made up characters with totally created cartoonish limbs. You might have an elephant trunk with a lion's tail, and he just enjoys making those kinds of characters up, and he puts them in entirely made up places like the Grinch and Whoville. The Grinch lives in a place called up on the mountain near Whoville. That place doesn't even exist. And so everything about Dr. Seuss is pretend, and it is so fun to read his books and see how creative he is. But that would also be fiction. So it's interesting to see the range of fiction, because you can have something like the American Girls that actually looks pretty realistic, but it is still considered fiction. We would call it historical fiction. But when talking about facts versus fiction, I want to give you some examples. So here are two examples. One is a fact. The President of the United States is Donald Trump. That is a fact. It is true. It's provable. It's real. It's something that we know is correct. But then a fiction statement would be the captain of the Jolly Roger is Patch the Pirate. Now that is pretend. It is fiction. There is a real man named Ron Hamilton, and he made up his own character, and he played this character on a series of audio adventures. And he pretended to be Patch the Pirate, who was the captain of a fictional ship, the Jolly Roger. He didn't really have a ship in real life, and he wasn't truly a captain, but his pretend character was. And so this is a specific example of fact versus fiction. But when we talk about facts, we also need to remember that facts can be true or false. They can be correct or incorrect. Sometimes it's a mistake, sometimes it's intentional, like lying. For instance, I ran 5 miles today. Well, you know what? That's not actually true, so I'm going to fix it so it is true. I have run 5 miles before. Now it's true. Now I can check it off and say, true. I ran 1,000 miles today. False. I have 3 sisters. True. I have 2 brothers. False. Now they could look to someone who wouldn't know any better. They all look true. And so facts have to be verified as true or false. So part of your homework today for both of these concepts that we've talked about, I hope you enjoy. The first one is make up a short fictional story. That means a pretend story. You can choose to do it however you wish. You can write it like Dr. Seuss, or you can write it like an American Girl story. Now you need to include at least 5 sentences. You can go far beyond that if you really get creative and are having fun. You can write even several pages, but you have to have at least 5 sentences in your fictional story. Also, make sure to look for correct capitalization, you have good punctuation, and good spelling. Now, this assignment, this is for the parents, is going to be a 10-point assignment. 2 points for the first 5 sentences. And then your parent is going to mark up capitalization, punctuation, and spelling for you to correct and give back to them. But then your other assignment is to write 2 true facts and 2 false facts. This will be fun because you want your false facts to sound believable. And then you can test these facts out on your parents, your friends, your family, and see if they can figure out which ones are true and which ones are false. It's kind of like the game, 2 truths and a lie. But for my students next week, when we get back together, you're going to read your story to each other, and then you're going to test your facts out on your classmate. So that is a 4-point assignment. All right, well, I hope you enjoy this, and I will see you next week.